It's Chelsea.
It's Nina.
And you're in the Critics' Kingdom. Hey! So this week we're going to be doing Lemonade Mouth.
Guys, the Disney crack is back.
It is. This is like classic Disney musical. Like completely by the book. Very well done. And it actually came out in 2011, so not that old.
Not old at all, and this was our first time watching it.
Yes, because we were both in college.
Yeah.
This was literally like freshman year of college.
Yeah, this was not something that we were watching, but that said, like I said, the Disney crack is back. Like, I was so into...
Return of the Crack?
I was so into everything about this film. So I guess with that, we should probably just go right into this recap.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so we open on essentially like a slow-mo, like before the concert situation.
Yeah.
So backstage with the artist, but like real, slowed down, slow shots, close-ups of like guitars and hands and hair being brushed and pinned up. Very like, lights, camera, action sort of scenario. And we're hearing a voiceover, and that's essentially telling us, Lemonade Mouth is such a big thing, but it wasn't always like that. And it essentially lets us know that, like, we're going to bring you back to the beginning of this band, to how this whole motley crew got together. So we sort of go out and we see that we go back in time, and we see that it's, like, it's so true Breakfast Club, what they do in this. It's fantastic. Where we just go back and we see, like, all right, motley crew in detention, people that don't necessarily like each other, and their music teacher, the music teacher at the school is Keisha Campbell, which is such a pleasant surprise. And she essentially says to them, you guys in detention, you're in the basement, they're in the basement storage room, and we're going to turn this into the new music room, so that's what you guys have to do during detention. You just have to clean this place up.
She was on her best Miss Darbus, honestly.
She really, it's fantastic.
From High School
it's a nice little, it was just, it got us from the jump. Like, from the opening, we were like, there might be something here. So we go back a little bit farther, and again, like I say, like the beginning is all very Breakfast Club, and we essentially get all of the kids being dropped off at school in true John Hughes fashion. So we get the background of this motley crew. There's Stella, who's new to the school. She's starting like a month into the semester, which obviously isn't great, and we'll figure out like she comes from like a family of geniuses and doesn't really feel like she fits in. She doesn't feel like she's smart enough for them, and she's a bit of a rebel without a cause, although not necessarily without a cause, but rebel child.
Trying to find her cause.
Yeah, exactly. She's a little, she's got some edges there. And then there's Wendell, full name, who I guess is supposed to be sort of the geeky one.
Yeah.
I guess technically. Obviously Stella's supposed to be like the basket case. Like Wendell's supposed to be sort of the geeky one, I suppose. And he is just really not into his dad and his dad's new girlfriend. Or not new, but his dad's girlfriend. He's really not about it. He's being dropped off at school, and he's being rude to his father about his father.
Because she's just younger than his father,
but not that much.
Not that much younger, but younger enough that he's like, and he makes jokes.
He's more mad about his mom like bouncing. Like that's his larger problem. But he's taking it out on the wrong person. We get Charlie, who his parents are dropping him off, and they're like, oh my god, you're going to try for soccer, you're going to be great, just like your big brother Tommy. And so he's living in the shadow of an older brother. Clearly he's supposed to be like the sports jockey one with all of that pressure. And then we see Mo getting dropped off. She's getting dropped off by her dad. She's I assume first generation Indian immigrant child.
Yeah. Or child of immigrants.
Child of immigrants.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'd be messing that up. Anyway, her parents are from India, is the main point. And she's sort of, getting the spiel from her dad about, like, how she has to work really hard and all of that. And we see her going to school, and she changes from, like, primped up to, a little bit, I guess, cool. Just a little bit cooler. But she's like obviously cool supposed to be, like, the princess.
Yeah.
Like that Molly Ringwald character. So then we go into it, and we just sort of see sort of the dynamics of the school. We see Tisha, who's, I'm just gonna call her Tisha. Like, we see her arguing with the principal, because he's essentially not providing any sort of funding or outlet for like arts and just anything that isn't sports. And he's kind of like, oh, nothing else makes money but sports, so I don't care. And he like rides away on his Segway, which is possibly the best thing about this film. And there's a lot to love about this film, but watching that principal like terrorize this school from a Segway.
Yeah, that's not the only scene with the Segway.
It is absolutely phenomenal.
Every time he pops in, most of the time it's on a Segway.
Yeah. But so they all get detention in various ways. With Olivia, it's pretty funny because she is literally just singing in a janitor's closet and
writing song lyrics.
And the principal he's on his Segway and he overhears singing coming from behind the door and just starts writing a detention slip, opens it up, and just hands it to her. And she takes it like this is normal, like this is a regular occurrence. But yeah, we just essentially see how they all end up in detention. Wendell calls the teacher stupid. Charlie accidentally kicks a soccer ball at the coach's face. Mo skips school with her boyfriend and gets caught.
Yep.
And then Stella rebels at a school assembly, essentially at like a pep rally situation. And they all end up in this room. And when they're when they're sort of supposed to start cleaning, you sort of get that like organic sounds, beats start to come about. And suddenly they're making music and they're singing and they sound really good and we get their sort of first performance and it's fantastic. And Tisha, their teacher, Tisha, walks in on them and is like, you guys have to form a band. And they're like, yeah, hard pass. And she's like, no, you guys should do it. And then you should do Rising Star, this competition where, I guess different bands, local like student bands compete and they can win a record deal. Because Tisha's thinking like that will show the principal that like arts are worth something. And again, they're all just kind of like, no. Mo has her own reasons because she's saying that Mudslide, this other band, is performing. And what we'll figure out is that her boyfriend, who she cut school with, who's also like a star on the soccer team, he is a member of Mudslide. Mm-hmm. And they're like sort of beloved by the school because, he and his soccer teammates are all very elevated in this space. So she doesn't want to do it because of that. And they all sort of disperse. Stella's really interested, so she sort of gathers them all together at the pizza place to be like, listen, let's give it a chance. Let's do one practice, see what happens. So they do one practice, it's not going very well, but then it's suddenly going amazing. And, from there, I guess they essentially just decide to, give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And because of that, Stella lets the principal know so that he can sort of get off her back, and he agrees to let them have a slot at the Halloween bash that's coming up to perform, which puts Mo in direct confrontation with her beau. And we see his band perform at this underground warehouse night situation, which is so accurate for teens but so not Disney. It was an interesting moment for that to appear in the film. But she essentially tells him, I'm in this band, and we're the ones who are performing, because they're upset because they're taking some of their stage time, their set time. She's like, we're performing, and, so it causes a little bit of a riff. But, we continue on, and the next day, there's a huge confrontation in the cafeteria between, Mo's boyfriend and his little sidekick friend, who is the bane of everyone's existence in this film.
Literally
the true little villain. And it ends with Stella spitting on him, literally spitting her drink out on him, and she spits out this lemonade, right? Which is the other sort of big thing that's going on in the school is that, so when we first go down to detention, which is in the basement, again, where all of the arts and sciences have been renegated to, she sees this really sort of funky, cool vending machine, and it has lemonade in it. And essentially they learn that there's this new this new power drink, Turbo Blast, that has funded the school's sports program, and as a result all other competing drinks will be removed from the school, like within a certain time frame, and this lemonade has grown to sort of define the band in some ways because of just their physical relationship to it. It's right outside the detention room, and that's where they practice. So there's like that whole thing going on, but she spits on him, and when the principal rides over in his Segway, he's like, "Lemonade mouth over here, spit on me," and we can assume that that's sort of where they get their band name. So essentially, like, there's just like a bunch of bad news going on leading up to this performance. Like, Gwen and Olivia are trying to work on songs, and they're getting like really good songs, but Mo finds out that her boyfriend's kind of cheating or something's going on.
Yeah, he's kind of trying to get her attention because she's like now really more focused on the band and like has other things outside of him, which bothers men.
It's true. And Gwen finds out his dad's getting married, and essentially just like the band's not in a great place. And Olivia actually like is kind of sick and has stage fright the night of, and everything just sort of looks like it's falling apart. Stella gives her some lemonade, like, "Here, drink this, maybe it'll help you feel better." And then they go on stage and they kill it. Like, they do the whole thing. It's fantastic, like great performances. And it gets to a place where it gets what the principal will call political, because Stella like has things to say, and the band has things to say, and they all like start saying them. So he cuts their performance off, like cuts all the sound, the lights, everything, which obviously makes them an overnight sensation. The school's now sort of obsessed. They become like really underground because the principal bans the band. He's like, "You guys can't play anymore," and they're all like, "Well, we can still play, just not on school property." So they start playing at the pizza place where the band.
That's not how principal power works.
Exactly. Like, you can't stop them from doing it. You can stop them from doing it on school property and nowhere else. But like their CDs are being sort of like circulated around the school, really underground. It's all really cool and really sweet, and sort of everything seems to be going sort of well. And they do decide that they're going to do Rising Star, and so they're prepping for that. And then like Olivia's cat dies, which is a whole thing because it's the last she had of her mom, and her mom's dead, and her dad's in prison. So they go and they comfort her, and they learn all those things, and we see a nice little like band bonding.
Yeah, nice little
which is
song,
cute.
too.
Yeah, they have a nice little song.
That's all about grief.
We watch Mo like really like stand up to her boyfriend and be like, he tries to apologize to her, and she's like, "No, you gotta come to me. You gotta come correct. Like, come better than that. Like, get it together. You gotta take me in my music or his bus." And she leaves him with that to ponder on. But because his little friend is just still upset at the idea of there being another popular band in town, which is literally what it is, it's not anything more complicated than that, he essentially incites like a baby riot / fight at the pizza place when they're performing, which gets them banned from performing at the pizza place by the owner.
Which is like their main place to perform.
Yeah, it's the only
they
place
can't
that
perform
they
at school.
could. And essentially just, everything sort of just begins to fall apart. Like, various members of the band start getting sick. Charlie, all of a sudden, really comes out of fucking nowhere, has a crush on Mo.
Yeah.
And is like, "Oh, now you're not with whatever his name is. We can be together." And she's like, "Well, that's just not how that's not how this works." 2, I don't, like, you're a friend and you're dope, but like, I'm not about it like that. And he throws a tantrum. Literally, like, throws it, like, it's so out of the blue. Goes home and like messes up his hands. When being a little shithead to his dad, like, or maybe it's when he finds out that they're getting married. Yeah. Anyway, like, but he's being difficult, and he drops a picture frame on his eyeball, so now he can't see, and he's the piano man, which is
his dad asked him to be his best man.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah. And he freaks out. So now the piano man can't see. Mo's also sick. It's like the whole band, essentially the band's just sort of
everybody is
apart.
broken.
And they're all like really not about each other at that moment. Then Stella like finds out that the vending machine is being taken out, like
the lemonade machine.
The lemonade machine is being taken out that like Saturday or something of that nature. And so she goes to protest it. And like they come down, she's like, "I'm not moving," and she's fighting with the movers. And essentially, long story short, they end up in prison. They all get arrested.
Yes, they're put in holding.
They're put in holding, and they manage to, in prison is when they sort of I'm gonna keep calling it prison. I know it's not prison. It's not even juvie, but it's just fun because it's another one of those tableaus of them like behind bars. And
Yeah.
It's such a great like Rebel Without Cause like 80s moment, or just like young teen moment. And that's where they sort of come back together. They start playing their little songs and whatever. And yeah, so it seems like everything might actually work out. And then we get to the night of Rising Star, and they choke.
Yeah.
Hard body, because they are new to this, and they're not like.
And they're also all sick.
They're all
and
sick.
Or damaged in other ways.
Or damaged, can't see, can't hold things. Yes. Like, they're all just struggling, and it's just not coming together at all. And then you have this really sweet moment where one of the members of the audience, who's been really about their music from jump, it seems, starts singing their song. And then the rest of the audience joins in, because they've been on the radio now. Like, people know their songs, and they sort of, and Mo's boyfriend says to his best friend, like, dude, this is dumb. I'm gonna go help my girlfriend's band because they're struggling. And he gets on there and he starts to play, and then they all like perform, but they're performing like with the audience performs to them, and it's this really sort of sweet ending moment where it's like, of course they don't win Rising Star, but like they win something else, obviously.
They win so much more.
And then top it all off, at Wen's dad's wedding, which they're all clearly invited to, and all the couplings have happened except for Charlie and his crazy self.
With Mo.
Exactly. We got Wen and Olivia, we got Mo and her man, and Charlie has learned to do better. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Stella meets this dude Mel, who happens to be the owner of the Lemonade. And essentially, we see at the end, gets him to sponsor a brand new auditorium for the school.
A nice auditorium.
A nice-ass auditorium for that school. And that is how it ends with, again, the band, winning in many
Back together again.
Back together again and winning life's competition.
There you go. So for the review.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It was
a really good one.
So good.
We were pleasantly surprised. Well, one of our friends had actually told us that she really liked it. But I had really, I don't talk with that many people that are like in the age bracket that would have watched this personally. So that would have grown up with this.
I've had low expectations for
most of them.
For most Disney Channel things post the age of 13, which is obviously because I was post the age of 13.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just been like, even with that sort of recommendation that we got from our friend, I was still like, we'll see.
Yeah.
And I have fallen so hard, y'all, so hard. Like, Chelsea can attest to this. After we watched it, on my drive home, I played the soundtrack for this film in my car.
She said she would.
And I did, and it was great. It was so fun. It's just, it's a good film. It's just genuinely a good film. So we can just start off by making that very clear.
Yeah, no, it's a good film, and I think what we were previously talking about that we liked so much was how they did all of the 80s influences, or just like teen films in general influences, because I know you even mentioned like Rebel Without a Cause, which came out in like the 50s, I think.
It's older.
It's a lot older, but it's a teen film, but about it's like in that same vein.
Yeah.
And it's like all the John Hughesian references in this one.
Yeah, dude. I would say this film is kind of like, it's like John Hughes meets Spring Awakening meets School of Rock packaged up for children.
Mm-hmm.
And like cookie cutter,
love School of Rock. Such a good one.
It's just, and there are various ways to sort of angles that we can enter into the discussion, but like, even just the detention concept, right? Or like that's how like a bit like people get together.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that I think is always going to be sort of relevant to the teen experience, I would say. And like John Hughes, like Breakfast Club captured that really well, and it sort of still holds up. But then like I particularly like as you're saying, like this rebelling that's happening, Because also, just shout out to the actor who played the principal, because...
Oh, yeah, Chris McDonald. He's been in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's, like, all over the place.
He's, like, an actor.
he's a real... there are a lot of real actors in this one.
Yeah, including Tisha.
Yeah, like, adults.
The adults, yeah. A lot of the adults
but
like,
he just, like, the comedic genius...
Mm-hmm.
in which he took, like, every 80s movie principle and just did them, like, so well, but so funny.
Mm-hmm. And made sense in, like, a 2011 type of way, because he very much reminded me of, like, yeah, it just brings you back to, like we said, the Hughesian aspects, the Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like,
yeah.
It was just very, like, when the principal was not a pal. but when they were instead a dictator.
A straight up dictator.
Which was a very much, like, 80s, like, thing. Like,
yeah.
So I think he did it so well and so funny, and like just the segue and him like rolling the segue around Tisha Campbell's character.
It's literally around her in a circle.
Literally just rolling.
It is like I can't imagine being at a school. Or here's the thing, I had like a slight version of that, because like we did have like there was one period of time where like there was a dean at my school who had like a particularly like. She just wore something that everyone could always see coming, so like we'd always know when she was coming. But she had like a whole thing with dress code, so skirts and such being too short. But
loved that rule.
Yeah, I mean I never wore skirts, so I was impressed about it. But like some of my
would just like to say very rude to girls that are tall, aka me, who is tall passing, and therefore. I have very long legs. I'm 90% legs. So therefore, if we have like a school dress code where you can't wear skirts that are like past your arm, that's not fair to me. You know how long my arm is?
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that to
Just
her.
don't do that.
That's not okay.
There's a lot of tall passing, especially in that age group.
Yeah. It was a struggle. That's why. But like again, we could see her coming from far away. But just the terror that I would feel of like watching my principal literally roll up on me. I don't like. No one needs that in their lives, and it is the perfect like psychological tool.
It is.
He's a genius.
It is perfect.
He's a genius. It's the perfect psychological tool. But like all of that, and even I think it even goes down to something that I latched onto immediately was this vending machine when she gets down to the basement, like right outside the detention room. It's just like it's a pop like candy red, like bright yellow, like old school, kind of looks like a jukebox vending machine. And like I can see why you would be like, oh, what's into that? I want to try that lemonade. But I think even beyond that, that is an example of what this whole film kind of captures, and I think that we both really responded to, was sort of this like a type of Americana that we don't necessarily talk about as Americana very often, but this sort of like pop punk part of the American culture, that we all recognize and all know what it is. We can call it hues, we can call it a throwback to the 80s, like all however you want to do it, and it is particularly like you see it sort of expanded in the 80s because the 80s is such a material time for America, and what it really gets into, I think, is the way in which like there's a part of Americana that is very linked to like our objects as iconography, and sort of our engagement with them as how we like rebel or conform. Like it's all about rebelling and conformity, but it's rooted in the materials that we consume and that we connect to. You see it in your Andy Warhol. You see it in your there are various eras where you see it sort of come up, but all of that is sort of that light is bathed around this film, and it makes it just like a fun. It just makes it a fun space to exist in for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, no, and I think it actually is one of those things that's reminiscent of almost like 50s. We've talked about briefly on here before when it came to like Alley Cat Strike, but in a different sort of manner.
Very different way.
But I think like it does very much. I feel like a lot of our iconography, a lot of those like old school brands and the way that we see things now are very much influenced by that time period specifically, because it's looked at as peak Americana because we had made it out of World War II, and like now everybody suddenly we'd invented a middle class because of like the New Deal, and like it was just like that time of
prosperity.
It was a time. It was a boom period.
Yeah, it's what people refer.
And like we have the booms and the busts and everything, but I think it's very easy to see in America. Like the 80s was a boom period.
Yeah,
you can easily tell that. And so I think that it is one of those things where it is a big part of Americana in general, like you were saying, and this does bring me back to that to a degree. It makes me think of American Graffiti too.
Yeah,
which was set in the 50s. So,
but it's the good. It's all right. Here's the thing. It's not necessarily the good part of Americana. I won't necessarily say it like that, but it's the part of Americana that I can sort of exist in without it being problematic as like a black woman in this country.
Which it definitely was at that time. Not to erase that.
Yeah, but just
would I want to go back there? No.
Yeah, but I mean, but sort of the like, especially I think specifically with the 80s, like I think that it's why. Like I said, like you can always sort of go back to this time as something that like teenagers seem to continually respond really well to. And there is something about like, I think about being in high school, right? And like, for example, like my book bag was always a big deal to me every year,
yeah.
right? Like the book bag that I got was gonna be like it's not who I was that year, but it's part of like who I am, And I remember, we had like 3 different pizza spots, school in New York, 3 different pizza spots around the school, right, that were close. And it was like there was one time where they did like a school-wide poll to see like, oh, like what's the best, like which is actually the quote-unquote best pizza spot, and like where you ate pizza like defined you, right? It was like, and so it's just this strange relationship to objects that is, again, like it's something that is very particular to that age, because you're attempting to define yourself and you're attempting to you're both attempting to conform and break away from what is around you. But it's also something that is very American to do, to sort of latch onto
material things.
And I think it's part of our history though. Like I think that it's something that as far back as you go in America, there's always like something that can be representative of an age or an era, and it's like in objects. You know what I mean? Like gold dust is manifest destiny. Like those 2 things are like intertwinable, you know what I mean? And they're interchangeable. And it's, and even the way that eventually becomes what names this band, And in particular, what I like about that is, and where I think it goes even deeper into things in America's sort of configuration that aren't always at the surface, is that, so she spits on him, and he says, oh, like, he's telling on her to the principal, oh, lemonade mouth over here spit on me. And that's what ends up becoming the name of the band. Now, we don't see the moment where someone says, like, oh, that's what we should call the band. It's just that's what the name of the band becomes. And rooted in this object, because there's this whole fight with sports and arts and lemonade versus the turbo blast, the power drink, but rooted in like at the root of these objects is like she literally takes an insult, takes something that is meant to degrade, something that is meant to put you in a box, put you in a certain place, takes that, claims it, and says, actually no, this is the mouthpiece that I'm going to use to speak out against you, or that I'm going to use to like make myself bust out of that box. And that in and of itself is actually a very, very American thing. The obvious one that we see is, like with the N-word, and the reclaiming of that to a certain degree that has happened in like the black populace of America. But it's actually something that I don't know how aware most people are that it goes sort of back even further than that. Or just it exists in other places, and that the term American in and of itself is actually that. It is a claiming of an insult. That's what was used by the British to put down British colonists. And there's a whole sort of, series of like historical thinkers, historical scholars, specifically around the American Revolution and sort of the creation of the American dream, American ideals, the whole shebang, that argue that America actually only comes about because it is specifically a response to that sort of insult. Like the term American was never used by anybody in the Americas. And when they when they were deciding, like, okay, if like we're British but we're not being given our British rights, so what does that make us? That's when they like begin to adopt the term American. That's why that's why the Boston Tea Party happens the way it does, like that dawning of Native American garb, like, is specifically that response. It's sort of claiming the nativeness of those colonists, even though like they really weren't, but claiming the nativeness of those colonists. And it's also like there's this idea that the reason that America got to the place, or Americans got to the place of being like, man deserves these rights, not a British man, is because they were denied the title of British man, which meant then, what are you? Like, why are you allowed to have these rights if it's not just because you're a British man? Oh, I'm just a man and I'm American. And that's like sort of how that whole situation comes about. So like it actually, like, it goes very, like, it is Americana, so deeply, deeply true and true, which is cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like another thing that is a part of this film is just the idea of like the censorship that they experience, specifically from the principal. But I think it's just in general how they also all feel pretty much in their families too, that nobody's really listening to them. And then in Stella's case, she feels stifled, and then from the principal, they feel literally stifled. But I think that is another one where it's like their whole thing is that I think their whole song is literally like, we just want to be heard or something like that. That they're starting to sing when he like cuts off the lights. And the reason that Stella gets in trouble in the first place and gets sent to detention is because she's wearing a shirt that says "Question Authority." And
literally was, like, and he told her to cover it up like from the morning. He was like, he saw her wearing it when she like visited his office as a new student. He was like, that's unacceptable. And her mom was kind of like,
right.
I didn't think it was a problem, but
yeah, because again, I think both of her parents are professors of some sort, or like her dad's like a computer whiz, but they're very, very smart. So I'm sure for them that's just like, what? Like,
yeah, it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but so yeah, I think like that's also a big part of it, is just like that you shouldn't censor kids, and that's it, like in that way, especially where it's just like if somebody, because he was acting like she was wearing some shirt that said like F you and F you too, and it's just like, she just said question authority. That's not really threatening you, sir.
It's also actually a good thing, I would argue.
Yeah, generally speaking, you should know how to question authority.
You should question authority. I would hope that, I mean, I don't want disobedient children, but I do hope that they question authority to some degree.
It will get read as disobedience for a little bit, though.
We'll see. Depends. Depends.
Well, they're trying to figure out the best way to do it.
Yeah, depend. We'll cross the bridges. We'll cross the bridges. But yeah, I mean, generally it really is, because I think it's not just the censorship and the dictatorship. It's also just the renegating of certain interests, certain, aspects of schooling as lesser, or as like less, or just not important in relationship to the big dominant ones.
It's like the High School Musical thing all over again, where once again we see that everybody doesn't matter unless you play sports, even though again it's like, wait, but art, math, science,
math and science,
art, math, and science. Wait, what? Like, what are you talking about?
Like, what do you mean?
But it's that
there's no college in America where you just play sports. That's like, that doesn't exist.
That's not a thing. Well,
there like yeah, there are colleges where sports play a huge role, but there isn't a Juilliard equivalent for basketball.
No,
that doesn't exist.
Not here.
Yeah, in America.
Yeah. Not
so
here.
Like, it's so when you think about that, it's like, huh.
It's also like well-rounded students, please.
Yeah, liberal arts education.
Well-rounded students, please.
That is the.
But yeah, and then I think you also brought up the idea of like sponsorship and how like that's the whole kind of one of the like underlying driving factors of this film is like the whole Males Lemonade thing having to be taken out because Turbo Blast has like essentially bought the school. And now the principal's at a point where he's just like, well, I don't care because they're giving me like $10 million. And even though this already seemed to be like a pretty good school, like it
was
wasn't.
very clean.
It's very clean. They weren't. He has a Segway. Like
He
they,
does
you know,
have-
like
but that could have been a personal purchase.
he definitely expensed that.
I mean, here's the thing. He definitely did. But there's also like, if he were at a broke school, I would believe that he bought the Segway.
Yeah.
I would believe that he did that. So it might have been after the fact. It might have been something that he put in like after he had already gotten it.
Yeah. But yeah, they were giving me, like your standard, like a decently good school. So yeah, it's like it wasn't a situation where they were in like a poor area or whatever. But he was clearly just like, so I'm getting money for all the sports related stuff, so therefore that's all I'm going to invest in. I don't care about any art, math, or science children.
He really didn't. He had them all in that basement.
They were all in the basement.
It was so toe up and not okay.
He had everything math and science and art related
in a basement.
But yes, and I feel like that's like one of those things where I've seen it come up more and more often, especially this year, because I know there was like a little bit of a hoopla I saw on Twitter with apparently some schools are now like sponsoring influencers, which gets into this really weird thing.
What?
Exactly. So now you're getting into this weird thing where it's like, wait, are y'all paying people to go to your school? Because that's not
like
that shouldn't that
public schools are
no private schools.
Private schools.
I have not seen a public one yet.
How does a private school?
But I saw sponsorships by like Baylor, which is a good school and one that people would be not saying that no shade to the schools that like accept more people, but like like they're a selective school. So it is a bit weird that it's like, okay, well now you're sponsoring influencers. And again, people don't know the details of it. So it's like, I can't say like they paid for them to go there, XYZ. It might have been that they knew that these influencers got in and they're like, yo, well, if you like post us, and they have to say it's an ad now legally on Instagram. So it was an ad. So I just think you get into a gray area. So I think like this actually was very ahead of its time in that regard, and it's something that happens all the time now where it's like, even if you go to any college in the US, I think public or private, you probably know whether Coke or Pepsi sponsors your school. Like I knew which one sponsored mine. We
had Snapple in my junior high school.
Yeah,
like which I assume is a Coke, or I don't know which Nestle.
I think it's
maybe a Nestle product.
We
were
Coke, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like, but that's a very big thing in schools, because they're trying to get this large population of young people
to consume their sugar poison.
To consume a lot more sugar, and then hopefully that will last you for the rest of your life, so that you'll be a lifelong customer until death.
Addiction?
Yes, they're trying to form a sugar addiction really early. Because that's why even elementary schools have drink sponsorships. Now, Miss Michelle Obama did her best to tear every single one of those things out of people's schools.
But listen, the food money in America,
I don't think it lasted.
That is deep pockets.
But I did hear from a friend that he hated it when it happened, when she tore out every single vending machine in his school. But now that he's older, he was happy. So just gonna put that out there.
Well, yeah, of course the kids are mad when you take away the Snickers bars. Like, heroin addicts are mad when you take away heroin. That doesn't mean that they should continue to use it.
He said he couldn't thank her enough, and it's just like 22.
That doesn't mean. I mean, like, here's the problem is, like, neither of these drinks should be sold in this. Like,
no,
Mel's Lemonade and Turbo Blast have no business sponsoring anything in the school.
No.
But yeah, and it again, like, this is
American consumerism and capitalism is just like its own thing.
It really is, and it's
because it's like, that's just wild to begin with. It's like, why would you have a major drink company sponsoring your elementary school? Like, why is that even a thing? Because I'm sure if you told that to people in other countries, they'd be like, what? Because I'm pretty sure I went to high school in Spain. I don't think we had a vending machine. Like, if I'm, like, actually thinking about it, I really don't think we had a vending machine.
My school didn't. I went to a private school.
I went to a private school as well. But even, but yeah, like, we didn't have a vending machine. I don't remember that even being, like, a thing.
But that might be a thing of, like, I mean, but here's where it gets weird. Because it's a thing of, so maybe it's a thing where, like, it's not in a private school because private schools don't need sponsorship money
to do it.
From a corporation. the question then becomes like, why is it okay? Like, it's a public school. In theory, it's supposed to be coming from like government public funds. Why is they allowing corporate sponsorship? Like, it just seems strange. And
Shady.
does that mean shady? And like, if a corporation chooses to sponsor your school, like, you get more funding from them. So we're creating situations where, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And where's
we
that
already
funding
have
going?
an issue with the economic, like the socioeconomic breakdown
of public schools,
of districts, determining like the level of education that kids get, because it determines the level of funding that those kids get, because it's a direct sort of tax relation. But it's like, now you're putting the corporate aspect on top of it. So like, what sort of regulation is happening in who's allowed to sponsor where and how much they're allowed to give at any given time in one place,
right?
Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, how, like, what sort, like, if
What
it's
are the
public,
rules?
it should be regulated probably to a certain degree. Not saying that I trust the government to do anything properly.
It probably is regulated. I wouldn't be surprised if
but how? Like, and that should be transparent. Like, that should be readily available information to me.
Yeah.
And it actually just really shouldn't happen. That's actually the main.
It shouldn't be a thing in general, and it's getting weird, guys. It's getting even weirder than it already was.
America's getting weird.
Especially if y'all are now sponsoring students.
America's mad weird.
Because I'm like, I don't want that to become a thing, because then that's just not going to be fair, and then you're going to have all these kids out here trying to be like influencers because they think that's the only way they can go to college.
Oh my god.
Which is already something we've created with the athlete industrial complex.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need another one for everybody else. Like, just stop charging so freaking much for school. But
there's also that. It's not. Here's what it really. It's just. Again, like, it's just, like, these are all just also American things. Let's just, like, just capitalism as a whole. Let's just think about it a little bit harder. How about that? Like, let's just reconsider how it works.
Reconfigure.
And then do that.
Yes.
Then do that for sure.
Let's not.
I would say, generally speaking. And it's like, I don't know, like, this stuff, and it's why I guess, like I said, I wish that I had been a small child when this movie came out.
Yeah.
Like, I really wish I had. But I think it really does come down to this. Like, there's a reason that this story is so cyclic. There's a reason why we can still tell the detention crew rebelling against what they've been defined as and against the authoritative, like, principle. Like, there's a reason we can still tell those stories and they still resonate. And it is because, like, there are certain just parameters that are set up in this great land of ours. That sort of every generation has to grapple with, and it's slightly different ways, right? The way the parameters are set up is slightly different. The way the generation is grappling with it is slightly different. But at its core, it's fundamentally the same thing over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So it's just a larger sort of reevaluation of, you know, our institutions and our practices that needs to be had. But all of that said, like, again, in there, like, there are things that are fun about America, and there are things in that Americana that, like, you know, like, the one good that comes from that sort of cyclic nature is that, like, every time punk comes around, it's fun. Like, we find fun ways to rebel every time. Yeah. And, like, watching those unfold is always, like, it's just always sort of a treat, or, like, living in that as it unfolds, you know, before it gets dicey and murdery is usually, like, you know, a good time.
America's a broken clock. Twice a day, it's right.
That's the best way to say it. This is one of the days where it's right. Lemonade Mouth is a right day. Yeah. It was right twice that day.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean.
Yes.
You guys get what I'm saying.
It extended the full yes, it was a full day.
And I think on that note too, I would just add that I really like in this, you know, that in this particular, I like that they take a stand that, you know, artistry does come with responsibility. and that like art is bigger than themselves, and you get that, you know, at the end when the audience sings back to them, like they take us down. I don't know how I personally feel about that. It's something that I'm still sort of figuring out in my own life, but and I do think it's something like we should all just choose one way or the other. But I do love watching these kids make that choice and watching like the people around them make that choice with them and living in it to its full extent. I think that that's really well done in this film. I think it's quite a beautiful message in that way too, of just like make that call and stand in it. If you're gonna make the call, stand in it and like live in it. And you know, no one can do you no one can do you any harm if you stand in your truth and stand in yourself and all of that.
Yeah, that's what you believe in. Hey, go for it.
So I did appreciate that that's in here, and it's in here so steadfast.
Yeah, no, I think they stayed true to that, and they were always fighting for what they believed, and that's why it worked. That's probably why they got so popular.
Yeah, because their songs were like about real stuff, as opposed to mudslide songs that were all like, they have a song that's like "Don't You Want to Be Me."
Yeah,
I was listening to it in the car. And it's like, huh, like this is very much this is a white man song.
Yeah, don't you want to be me?
And it's to a certain extent, yes. But that's your doing, like.
I would like your privileges. That's about it.
Yeah, you made it that way.
Right.
It's the game that we're playing. And then I think, like, just off of that, I guess, you know, I just really like the women in this are great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they all, like, they stand in, you know, they do it well. You know, I actually am not, I don't know if this was written specifically, because it's based on a book, so I don't know if it was written specifically sort of with, like,
the strong women characters.
Strong women, like, leading, like, that was intentional. But the way it worked out in this, like, even Wen's dad's girlfriend is, like, fundamentally, you know what I mean? Like, she's the one who tells him that his song is on the radio.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the women in this are all just, like, doing good things.
Doing their thing.
Yeah. And I appreciated that.
No, it is nice to see, and especially a lot of, all of them, the main characters, all of them except for Olivia are women of color, which is nice. Mo being Indian, played by Naomi Scott. And then Haley Kiyoko plays Stella. So I think that that's also, you know, an important part of it, where it's like, you know, you do have a very diverse women side cast, because I feel like normally when we
Charlie's
he's white in real life.
Oh,
that's why I didn't.
Okay, fair enough. Never mind. Is Delgado supposed to be Italian? Move on.
Yes, but yes, I do think it's nice whenever you see women of color in these things, because I feel like typically when people do diversity, for some reason that seems to mean white women and then men of color a lot of times. So for this one, it was kind of nice being like, okay, and you've got like lighter women of color, but still very much visibly women of color. And I think that that's an important, you know, thing. And then I feel like all the characters are very well developed as well.
Oh, for sure.
So they all have like full like lives. It's not a situation where like Mo feels underdeveloped to Olivia because Olivia's the lead, and it's like no. Everybody gets the full circle.
Yeah, and again, I think that goes back to the fact that it's based on a book.
Yeah.
I think that it's because it's easier to get that stuff when you're boiling down, you know, and you're paring down, as opposed to when you have to create full things, although that really doesn't give anybody an excuse, because, you know, people still create stories and they're able to do that. But,
yeah,
you know, just saying. I think that that's part of why it's so good. I mean, like, besides, because the music is fantastic. Let's just be real. The music is fantastic, and the choreography in this, it's so good. Like, I ate this up. I really did. You could, like, Chelsea, let them know, like, I had a time.
Yeah, Nina was enjoying herself.
I was watching this film, y'all, and I will watch it again. But, you know, like, it is, I think, so developed because it felt like a story that someone took time with. It felt like a story that someone, like, really sat down and thought through. And the sad truth is, it doesn't have to be the case, but the sad truth is you don't get that with scripts as often. You don't get that with film. as often, generally speaking, and then specifically TV movies, specifically like children's TV movies, like you're not gonna, it doesn't necessarily feel that way. But with this, it definitely did, and I think I can understand why our friend told us that this one, when it came out, was kind of a big deal, and people really responded to it in a very, very like visceral way. I get that because I responded to it in a very real and very visceral way, and I'm 20, so
you're not 20,
yeah,
she's 20 something.
I'm 20,
I'm done.
And it wasn't made for me, so yeah, definitely.
Yeah, shout out to Jasmine for telling us it was good. We were excited when we watched it, and it was so good. But yeah, would you show this to the babies?
Oh, most definitely. You know what I'm gonna do? I think I'm gonna have a musical Disney Channel original movie marathon.
Yeah, you can do that.
Or maybe that's a bad idea because then maybe they'll have too much music coming to them at one time. So maybe I should space it out. But regardless, this is gonna be like top. Like they might watch this before they watch High School Musical. I'm gonna be completely honest because I love this. Controversial, I don't care. Loved it more than High School Musical. Thought it was fantastic. Thought it was amazing. It's like Cheetah Girls, Lemonade Mouth. Like, that's where I'm living right now.
Okay.
In the Disney Channel original movie musical world. Personally.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely also. I also definitely recommend if you've never watched it, if you're like the same, general like time period as us and like missed it or weren't watching at that point, I would say watch it. It was a fun one to watch. And it did capture the Disney magic in a way that I feel like some of the other films that came out that we've talked about that came out in like this like 08 to 11 period were a little missy, so
missy and messy.
Yeah, just
messy and missed the mark. Yes, they did.
Misses. But this was a good one. Definitely would say rewatch it if you grew up with it. And then watch it for the first time if you haven't already. And yeah, I would definitely also show it to mine. This was a fun one, and kids would enjoy it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's also nice seeing a lot of the actors have moved on to doing, a lot of like bigger things. So the kids, the kid actors, not the adults, of course. Though they also have done big things. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think with that,
we'll catch you next week.
Yeah. Have a good week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.